Yeah, I'm going to keep on going through these images. This is part two, of course, of this series. Um, the reason why I'm making this, series is because I used to do a lot of stuff about the paranormal. I've started focusing on it again. I've got all this spare time because of Corona, and it's kind of fun. And also, this is like a ghostly series. I used to have a channel called Ghostly Atheist. Used to have loads of documentary clips and a whole bunch of things that got taken down due to copyrights. Around about 4 years ago, and about a year ago, it got taken down again. But that's when I'd taken off pretty much all the documentary stuff I had issues with. I'd counterclaimed all of the stuff I had issues with various corporations, including CBS, and yeah. I wanted to do more about the paranormal. That was kind of like my original stuff. I used to do a lot of stuff about that in the day as well. So this series is all about that. Classic image here. This is obviously a thumbnail for someone's blog or what have you. I don't think these things are very convincing. I've never really thought that these things are convincing from a scientific perspective or a photographer's perspective, the science of photography, if you will. All you need is a long exposure. 30-second exposure, you get a very soft image, and someone steps in, stands there for 5 seconds and fucks off. So you do an image like that. And there's a lot of very long exposure photography back in the 19th century, but also a lot used now, and people call it evidence. I don't see anything there in this, grainy image. That I mentioned about ISO in the previous video. That looks imported, like it's fake, or in fact it is fake, edited in, and it also looks like it's been heavily edited as well. So there may have been a person originally there, but they've been greyed out and made to look different, and this kind of motion blur kind of thing. If that was in an actual video, it's, surprising, but it's more like really amateurish stuff. It's obviously just a joke. Cool image. Obvious fake import. That looks like motion blur. Looks again like, long exposure photography. That's obviously an import. That looks like someone hanging from a tree, or a bag or something hanging from a tree. It's all that kind of stuff. And then people say, now it's gone. Where is it? And it's like, well, you're pointing at the wrong tree or what have you. But, yeah. That looks very different from the surrounds, suggesting it's probably an easy import, basically. Darkness here, darkness there. That is proper darkness. This is given extra darkness for no reason. Which way is she facing? Person in a dress. Doesn't really seem to impact the surrounding area. Yeah, that's likely fake. Oh, but remember, you can be an apologist and say, well, why would ghosts leave shadows? In which case you have to throw out a whole bunch of examples where people say it's real, but a ghost apparently leaves a shadow. But let's ignore that, shall we? So that looks a bit like a little person, apparently. There's a guy there. What's he doing? Going for a piss. And next to a lake. And maybe he's got a fishing rod there. Maybe that's what that is. And not his pee stream. And yeah, that looks a little bit like a little person. But the scale would make them tiny, minute. They're closer than the man. So are you suggesting it's a fairy? Come on. That's obvious import. You can just tell difference. But a lot of these things are made tongue-in-cheek anyway. And then fans, believers, pick them up even if they originally were a spoof. To be a blurry form, almost like someone standing on the stairs, or there's a sheet hovering on the stairs or above the stairs. Not very convincing. That looks like just simply a cave and a reflection, and someone afterwards has gone, it looks a little bit like a person. Not very convincing. Okay, I can't examine that. Some of these images, by the way, to be entirely fair, because they are thumbnails for things, so this is the problem when you type in a basic search, is you'll see the so-called evidence in video. Like this could be a poltergeist video, couldn't it? Things flying across the room, therefore some kind of active spirit force is moving things, or so some people might claim. Obviously that's an import and a fake, you can tell. How can you tell, Rob? Well, it looks completely different, doesn't it? A relatively clean but blurred image Looks a bit like, what's the name of that? Is it Dobby from the Harry Potters? I'm not a Harry Potter fan. Or a dark version of that. But yeah, it doesn't really match with the background. Looks like I've taken just a standard image. Could be an old image they owned or whatever and created this spoof. That's imported. Imported, basically transposed over the image with some blur. Oh, that's an image I saw in the previous video. That's the wider video shot. So, yeah, could be something like crawling over the lens, to be honest. You don't know. Hard to tell with these things. I gave a relatively agnostic view on my previous video because if I do not know, I cannot say. I can suggest, I can give my opinion, but I can't say. Are people with guns? Well, that's, kind of not ghosts, is it? It's meant to be ghosts? God knows. That one there looks like a little face in the background. Looks like a dummy or a doll or something. So, yeah. For some reason, there's a lot of blur in the other images. That's very still. The rest of the image looks blurry. The girl looks blurry. The kid doesn't. Is that a pillar there, like in a pub or something, or a house? More likely a pub, looking like that. Yeah, it could just be a dummy in the background. Doesn't really convince me. That's obviously imported. Is that meant to be a person over here? Over a gravestone? Yeah, it doesn't seem to be very convincing. If it is a thing that looks like a person, it might be a person. I can't really tell. Could be imported, more likely than not just simply a person prattling around. That's obviously not a ghost. Imported. As I said before in the previous video, because these things go around when you just type in a basic search, you see them over and over. Someone prattling around, basically. Many of these, by the way, would be admitted to. Pardon me. They'd be admitted to where someone has actually said, yeah, we faked that. But then stupid channels on YouTube thought, hey, we're going to capitalise on this. No, it's real, it's real, it's real. And they just say, oh, no, we made it. Well, I won't bother doing a retraction video. Sorry. Drinking coffee. This image is actually very similar to a previous image. We had the same heavily illuminated woman in the background. And it's not actually the same shot. But the woman's image is the same. In one, it has her in a shack. And, a bunch of greenery around her or in front of her. In this one it isn't, so the image is obviously taken differently and transposed, which was pretty much my conclusion last time. That's not very clear. Could be anything, or anyone. Could be a person dressed in a robe at a distance, low quality, and then people go, what the fuck, and they try and get attention on the internet, or whatever. Lots of fakes out there. And unconvincing stuff. Is that meant to be a face? Doesn't look like a face to me. Looks a bit like a mask. What's that? Looks like a dummy, to be honest. Like you're getting some weird shops and things. Like, oh, it's an old-fashioned, I don't know, Dorset farm shop with a little mock-up of a person in it, or whatever, stupid stuff like that. Is that meant to be a ghost? That blur there, not very convincing. It's like, what the fuck with the image? A lot of people take these images and they're trying to present it as an old-fashioned image. And it's clearly it's a digital copy, obviously, if it's online. So they're saying it's a scan of film or a scan of an old image, an old photo. And, yeah, I just don't buy it. Obviously, a person wearing a sort of robe thing, a veil, wearing a sort of like wedding veil sort of thing. Imagine if ghosts had nothing better to do than turn up and haunt the living. Wouldn't say very much about the afterlife, would it? That one looks really fake. I just think, okay, there could be a person in the window, right? Yeah, okay. Is it? Probably not. It looks simply like there's a middle part there and there, but you're meant to assume there's hair here. It's kind of implied by the shape of the image. But it looks very different from the surrounding image. Yeah, it could be a guy in the window, actually, when you look at it close up. But I'm not terribly convinced. That's a blur, an obvious import. Don't know what that is. Is that meant to be a ghost there? Looks like a person. That looks just a weird edit or mutation in an image. Remember, there's lots of editing methods which go back quite literally a couple of centuries now. Well, about that much. To the earliest time of film in the early 19th century. As soon as you had people taking pictures of any kind, they were basically, well, learning to edit them. That's obviously a fake. I've seen that one before. Can't really make anything out in this one. That's obviously just a girl in the corner. If it's too cliche and based on folklore, like Japanese folklore of a girl crawling out of television or something, then I wouldn't worry about it. So just a bit of my coffee. Person in the background, in the shadow, can't make them out clearly. You're going to say it's a ghost. They're probably walking down and saw that it was, you know, you're taking a picture and thought, oh, I'll turn back. So, yeah. Don't know who the fuck she is. Well, I don't know either. I mean, these are obviously mock-ups. What's that meant to be? The so-called chupacabra? Or whatever, if that's how you pronounce it. The kind of Latin American kind of ghosty demon thing. You know, oh, is that meant to be a ghost? A lot of these people do this trick. It's actually a really old trick, goes back decades now, even with digital. You record film, say with an old camcorder, and you move, you pan, you manage to get something, you know, in the background. You do it now with a modern camera, you get a similar sort of thing. The trick is to make it more nebulous, less visual. If it's too sharp and clear and you say, hey, that's a ghost there, it's just obvious you've got a mate who's acting like a prick, with a wig on, probably. Same there, look, hey, hey. Yeah. What's that? That looks like a painting. That looks like quite a well-known painting in the background. It's obviously not a real girl. It's got a cartoonish element to it. It's got no real dimension, like a flat surface. As if there's a picture, a print from like an old painting in the background. So I don't consider that to be really valid. Because you may remember there's one of a girl crying with a blanket and one with a teddy bear. It looks a bit like one of the ones with a teddy bear. Many of these were sold quite freely at common supermarket, sorry, not supermarket, high street shops like Woolworths and others back in the 70s and 80s. And that's where a lot of these ghost legends come from, a bit like the crying boy and, you know, as the painting left over in a burning house. That whole myth, but I won't get into that in this video. It looks a bit like my sister, actually, but it isn't. That's obviously just, you know, bullshit. Saw that in the previous video. These kinds of things are obviously, you know, for fun. They, you know, don't represent reality as such. Although, you never know. Sometimes these things are exaggerated, aren't they? There's really someone with a medical condition somewhere. So I wouldn't be the first one to fuck up there, would I? What's in this one? Can't see anything. That's your mate in a robe. You can see her clothes underneath. See, you're a ghost dressed in white robes, but you've got a football top underneath, have you? Black and yellow, what's that for? You know, could be, I don't know, an away team for, I don't know, whatever. Doesn't really matter. Maybe it's yellow and green if she was out in the light. You know, it'd be like Brazil or something. The kind of examples you get, a lot of it's really pathetic. I know, once again, I'm going through thumbnails, and this is another long video, but it does help me to give my opinion on a lot of the so-called evidence, and it's fun, you know, it's entertainment for me as well as for the one person who watches. Thank you for watching. And, yeah, you know, and there's a lot of art out there. A lot of people do this as a matter of entertainment and interest, and it's only thick people who take it seriously, you know. Is that meant to be something real? Looks like a kid with mushy peas on his face and, I don't know, a plastic bag around his body. What's that? You know, real ghost caught on camera, 5 scary videos, blah, 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 from Nuke's Top 5. That's channels they capitalise on. This kind of nonsense. Oh, well, we'll leave that there. Anyway, I'm probably going to go into videos now and other searches so I can give my response to some of the so-called evidence there. This search, in fact, is just a basic search. I'll just go to the top of the page. This search I've been using for these 2 videos is ghost photo reel, which probably isn't the best thing, because a lot of it is really just, low quality grainy images and that spoken about by YouTubers. But hopefully I'll be able to get into some more decent images and decent videos in future installments of this series.